Welcome back to Management 2020. The goal of this presentation is to talk about the preparations we can take to prepare business presentations. So we'll talk about establishing the purpose and the goal of a presentation. We'll talk about some constraints to consider when preparing a presentation, about what kind of content should be included, about how to research or prepare for the presentation. Then we'll talk about both some obstacles that can create problems for presentations, but also some tips for smoother, cleaner, and more effective presentations. So your textbook talks about maybe defining a difference between a purpose and a goal for a presentation. And it suggests that purposes could follow some very general or generic patterns, such as informing, demonstrating, persuading, entertaining, or performing a ritual. And so these specific tasks are maybe sort of general or high-level ways of viewing the purpose of a presentation, but then we might have a more specific goal. So for example, if I know that the purpose of my presentation is to persuade, then what is it that I'm going to persuade about? So it might be the goal of my presentation is to convince senior management to fund this new project. And so I'm going to be more specific about what it is. I know I'm doing persuasion, but what is my specific goal? If maybe instead it's about demonstrating, right? Then my goal is to teach my team how to use a new budgeting software that the organization has purchased. So being more specific with our goal, but also understanding what is our general purpose. And those two steps in order can help us focus on what is it we want to accomplish with this presentation. So as we think about the presentation, there are some constraints we should consider after we've established our purpose and our goal, and what can realistically be accomplished within the time limit we have. If we only have 15 minutes, then can we really go to the level of depth? And this is where we get back into the concepts of scope, right? How much information can we provide within the time frame that we have? And what is the physical location of the presentation? How will the audience and the presenters interact? Will it be face-to-face in person? Will it be around a table? Or will it be a large conference hall? Or is it a virtual presentation? Is it a Zoom meeting where I can see the small number of participants? Or it is a huge webinar or social media live where you can't see the participants as you're talking? That can impact the content you share and the methods you use when you present the topic. And always, we need to consider about technological limitations. What's going to happen if technology doesn't work the way we want? Do we have a backup device? Do we have a backup channel? Do we have a way to give the in-person presentation if we don't have slideshows and computers and microphones? So always preparing and thinking in advance. If I can't do it my ideal way with the technology, what's another way that I can present this? Then we need to think about the content. So what is our message? What does the audience know? What don't they know? And what is it that we can teach them? And essentially, we're trying to develop a thesis statement. What is our purpose or our persuasive goal for the presentation? We also want to think about appeal. How can we connect the audience to our message, but also to ourselves? How are we going to appeal to them? What interest are we going to give? And then the appropriateness. How useful is our message for our audience and for society as a whole? Is this the right kind of message for the right time? Do people need this message? And lastly, ability. Can we think about how can we improve our performance? Our use of technology, our use of our voice, our ability to construct a logically flowing presentation. Many presentations may require some research. As you go to give your presentation, you may realize that in order to effectively share your message, you need to learn some new information. Or you may discover that you need some sources to help support your information because your audience will expect maybe some data to back up your presentation rather than just taking your opinion on its own. And so we may need to look for sources and determine how accessible are sources, and how credible are these sources. We want to make sure that we're using sources that our audience will view as credible and useful and relevant to our topic. There's also some ethical considerations we want to think about as we do our research. Again, as we talked about, are these sources credible? Are they widely accepted as good sources of information that don't have bias? If we're going to use AI, we need to be really careful. AI is prone to hallucinations, which is the sense that it will make up information if it doesn't have accurate information. AI should actually never be a source, just like Google is never a source. Now, Google and AI may suggest sources to us, but then we need to go to those sources firsthand, evaluate their credibility, their relevance, their appropriateness, and then if we like it, then we can use those as our sources, but never something like a search engine or an AI tool. We need to think about attribution. How are we going to let the audience know where this information has come from? We may want to verbally cite our sources. If we're using images or data sets, we might want to cite that on some slides that we provide. We want to make sure we're avoiding plagiarism, that we're not copying sentences and paragraphs from AI or from other sources unless we are going to properly quote them and provide correct citation information. And through all of this, we want to stay organized with notes. Sometimes researchers will, in their notes, have recorded some interesting ideas, and then they didn't indicate where those ideas came from. And so when they get ready to do a presentation, they can't use that information if they don't have a proper attribution or citation for it. So the more organized we are with our notes, every time we find some good information, we make sure we record where it came from so that later on, if we need to, we could cite that information. The textbook suggests there are three main obstacles to an effective presentation. And the first one is language. Language that doesn't connect with our audience, language that our audience doesn't understand, or language that our audience maybe finds offensive or irrelevant. So we want to make sure that we're choosing words and phrases that connect with our audience. They understand these words. We're avoiding things like slang and jargon. And we're choosing words that are concise but specific and informative. Another obstacle can be perception. If the audience has a negative perception of our topic or somehow has a negative perception of us, we want to be able to establish a positive connection with the audience and help them feel open to accepting our message. So we need to make sure that we present ourselves and we present our topic in a way that is accessible to them and that helps connect our message and our values with their values. And lastly, we need to be aware of ethnocentrism. We talked about this previously, but ethnocentrism is the concept that one's own culture is better than others. And so if we take an ethnocentric approach to our presentation, we may be offending people. We may be creating it so that they don't receive our message because they don't understand our message because we are making assumptions about what they understand or how they view the world, and that can be an obstacle to the success of our presentation. So here are some tips, things that can make a presentation better. First is to think of your presentation as a conversation with the audience. It's just that you're taking a longer turn than normal and you're part of the conversation, which means you need to consider what the audience has already thought or what has already been said or what's already understood in this conversation before you begin your presentation, and that you're making sure that you're receiving feedback or interaction from them. And sometimes that feedback and interaction is just nonverbal, but you're looking at, are they paying attention? Are they nodding? Are they giving you feedback that they're understanding? Or are they giving you feedback that maybe they're confused? And maybe you need to stop and ask some questions and get them involved in that presentation. Use roadmaps and signposts, right? This is the idea of helping the audience know where the presentation is going to go by providing an overview, but also then reminding them of some of the stages of the presentation. You know, here's where we are now, here's where we're going to go next, so that they can feel involved and they're building a good mental map of your message and the argument you're using to build towards your message. And lastly, don't worry about being perfect. No one is perfect the first time they give a presentation, but the goal is to practice and improve. And actually, on SUU campus, students have access to many resources. Whether you're on campus or whether you're online, you have the ability to access the Public Speaking Center, which will pair students with tutors who can help them practice their presentation skills. If you're on campus, you have access to the VR lab, which has software like virtual speech, which can allow you to practice presentation, group meetings, and other types of business communication interactions that you can do with AI avatars to build your confidence so that when you then use those actions in a real context, you'll feel more confident and prepared. So in this video, we talked about preparing to give good presentations by doing the work ahead of time, by planning and researching, but then also anticipating and preparing for potential obstacles or problems.